Cairo, Seattle.
It's time to get schooled with the professor, John Clayton.
Welcome to Schooled with the Professor. Going to have some fun because now we're at the mid-season mark and kind of blending what the draft has produced along with what it could produce, but also how it affects some of the trends going into the NFL. And joining us right now from the NFL Network, Daniel Jeremiah. And Daniel, of course, you do such a good job of getting ready for the draft, but I wanted to kind of go into a lot of the trends that are going on and what's happening in the league right now. Now, obviously, one of the big issues is offensive line and how tough it is to take young offensive linemen out of spread offenses and taking them out of air raid offenses and trying to get them productive. Where would you say the state of the offensive line is based on a bad draft last year for offensive linemen and where it's heading right now?
Well, it seems like each and every year, John, we're seeing an influx of talented defensive linemen, and we're seeing just an absolute dearth of offensive line talent. And you kind of touched on it with the spread. Everybody, is quick to point out how the quarterbacks are going to adjust. And coaches have figured out a way to do that. They've figured out a way to kind of incorporate a lot of those concepts and to work them in and get them on the field early and to be able to make them comfortable. Offensive line-wise, however, it's been another story. It's a bigger adjustment. And when you look at the guys that have been successful, I go back to when I started, in 2003 with the Ravens. We always put a premium on guys that had started in the Big Ten for offensive linemen. We like guys that had started, 30, 40 games in the Big Ten because they're going to be in a three-point stance. It was a lot of stuff that was going to translate. We knew we were getting guys that were tough and smart and maybe not as athletic as some of the other guys around the country, but you knew they had a high floor and they'd be able to play early. And some of those things are still kind of holding true today. I mean, I look at a guy like Pat Elflein, going to the Vikings, played a bunch of football at Ohio State, and the adjustment may be a little bit easier for a guy like that. But it's hard. The other thing is you don't have any practice time with the change in the CBA, so you don't have enough physical reps to teach and to get these guys ready to go. So it's a major issue and it's a big challenge.
How many teams do you think right now do not have good offensive lines around the league?
Oh, well, I mean, I would say you could count the good right tackles on. Wouldn't need all 10 fingers, I don't think, to count the really good right tackles in the league right now. I would say really good offensive lines. I mean, if you have a good standard, I would say you're talking about 7 or 8. I mean, it's not good.
Yeah. And I'll tell you, Daniel, the impact is immense because it's not necessarily the offensive line impact in the AFC, but you now have 9 AFC teams that are scoring less than 20 points a game. And, of course, scoring less than 20 points a game, including 45 miscellaneous touchdowns, a big increase from last year, either pick sixes and fumbles returned. So, really, scoring league-wide is like 20.2 points a game, but in the AFC, you have 9 teams not even scoring 20 points a game.
Well, I mean, just look at one division. Look at the AFC West and just look at the accumulation of defensive line talent in that. I mean, you look at the Chargers with Ingram and Bosa, what they're doing. You got Mack, who's one of the top 3 defensive players in the league up there at Oakland. You've got Denver with Von Miller and their whole host of pass rushers. You got Kansas City with all their dudes. I mean, so there's so much more talent on the defensive side of the ball up front than there is offensively. And if you want to see something if you want to see a horror film, I know we've got Halloween coming up. I mean, go watch a preseason game and watch when the backups get in. Oh. And if you think it's lopsided with the frontline players, where do you see how lopsided it is with backups? So there's just talent and depth up front across the league on the defensive side of the ball, and offensively it doesn't exist.
No question. And usually when scoring starts to go down, which is starting to do, particularly offensive production, the league usually comes up with the competition committee and figures out new ways to increase scoring, because that's just the nature thing. But from the draft standpoint, is it now just becoming more pronounced that it's better defensive drafts than, say, offensive drafts?
Yeah, it sure feels that way. I mean, we I'm sure we'll see a cycle through where we're going to see a good offensive line class roll through again at some point in time. But it just seems like year after year after year, you're getting defensive line talent. And I think when you look at the college game, it's pretty simple. If you can get good quarterback play and great defensive line play, you have a chance to win a championship. mean, you go back and look at the Clemson offensive line last year. If you broke them down individually, not very good. I mean, tell me where all these great offensive linemen that have come out of Clemson the last couple of years. They won a whole lot of football games because they've had a great quarterback and they've had waves of defensive linemen. So that's just kind of what you need in the college game. And if you're recruiting a kid, that's where it starts. And you've got, these kids all play, the big-time guys play both ways in high school. He's going to have a better chance to impact your team as a defensive tackle than he is as an offensive guard. It is what it is. So those great athletes, they're not putting them on the offensive line.
Which is really unusual. And so, in fact, would I be correct in saying now 2014 was probably the last good offensive line class? A couple good left tackles, probably 8 good centers, a bunch of good guards. But since then, I mean, the 215 class first round was bad. 216, of course, I think only 33 offensive linemen drafted. I mean, there is real, and 213 as a draft overall was pretty poor. That's like 3 out of 4 years where you really can't get the good offensive linemen.
Yeah, I think when you look at the 2016 group, I think it'd take a little time for these guys to stay healthy, stay on the field, and a little time to develop. But I think when you look at ability-wise, with Conklin, the way he's played has been pretty good. And then you look at Ronnie Stanley with his ability. Tunsil has been a little up and down, but he's really just getting a chance to settle in at left tackle now. I think he's going to be a good player. Taylor Decker, when he's been healthy, has been a good player. So I think that group has a chance to be pretty good when we look back on it a few years from now. But, just the ready-made packages, guys that can come in and play and impact and play at a high level right away, it's hard to find.
Now, what's it look like coming up next year for the offensive line? Does it look like it has a chance to be a decent class or not?
I think I would say average at this point in time. Now, I'm just kind of getting rolling on some of these guys. I think the best guy that I've seen so far is Connor Williams from Texas, and now he's been hurt. I believe he got hurt in the USC game earlier this year, so he's been out. And he's a really, really good player. He wasn't playing as well this year as he did last year, and he's not a prototypical size guy. He's going to be, I think he's going to end up coming in under 6'4". So he's not a 6'7" kind of prototype left tackle, but he's a really good player. Western Michigan has a good one who's probably, I would think of more kind of a late 1 type guy. And then interior-wise, Ohio State's got a kid in Billy Price who's pretty good. But, no, it doesn't look on the surface like it's going to be a huge year up front.
Yeah, that's not good for teams. But on the positive side, how good has this class of cornerbacks been? Because Seattle has the 13th cornerback taken, and Shaquille Griffin has been sensational. I think that of the top, maybe there's about 8 or 9 cornerbacks that are rookies that are starting, and most of them look to be pretty good.
Yeah, and you've got some size and length that you can get excited about. I mean, there's the Thursday night game has got 2 kids that have been up and down in their play. But when you look at Humphrey for the Ravens, and you look at Tankersley for the Dolphins, they're both long. They're both really, really athletic. I think they both got a chance to be really good. Just a little bit of development that needs to take place there. But Shaq Griffin was a guy at Central Florida. He ran like crazy. He was competitive. That's what I loved about him. I think I'd given him an early 3rd round grade. Did they end up getting him a little bit later than that? Would they get him like the 5th round or something like that?
Yeah, they got him in a 3rd.
Oh, they did. They get him in 3rd. Yeah, he was. That was right where he should have gone. But he's in a deep class. He kind of slipped a little bit through the cracks. But I always start with guys at that position when you've got the speed and you've got the competitiveness and you've got some size to go with it. The technical things you can work through. And ironically, that's kind of, with Richard Sherman coming out, even though he didn't run that fast, he had some technical stuff he needed to work through. And that, to me, speaks to the job they do of coaching that position and developing that position in Seattle. You got to give them a lot of credit for that.
Yeah. Well, Chris Carson came like in the 7th round for Seattle, and it took him maybe a couple weeks, and within just a couple weeks, he looked like the best back. And then he gets into the regular season and starts and was the best back.
Yeah, and he was somebody. Now, that was one I would say, okay, that one surprised me a little bit. He's a good player. I thought he was a role player in the league. I thought he'd be a backup. But you're right. I mean, you can flip on the games early, and he was clearly the best back. Had a little more giddy up than maybe I gave him credit for. But, I mean, that's that draft class. It was all the way through. You're in good shape. You can find a running back. So you see the impact of a Leonard Fournette You see the impact of a Todd Gurley that they've had on their team's high first-round picks. You see Ezekiel Elliott, obviously, huge impact, Dallas. But for every one of those guys, I can find you a Jordan Howard and a Kareem Hunt you can find outside the first round that could have a major impact and free up to go in another direction with your first pick. So that's going to be a fascinating debate to take place in draft rooms.
Yeah, but here's the funny part about it. It's like, okay, so here's a good influx because it's been a couple years now that there's been a pretty decent young crops of running backs and top running backs coming in. And so you're thinking, oh, boy, the game's starting to shift to more running, which really isn't the case. And in some ways, what it's doing, it's still flushing out the higher-priced veteran guys and putting it more on the younger guys. And so, there's still going to be sharing of positions. There's still going to be very few backs getting 20 carries a game. So even though there's more good young backs coming into the league, it's maybe just kind of flushing out some of the salaries of some of the new guys or the old guys.
Yeah, no, I think it's bad news for the old guys, no question. But the interesting thing is you look at Le'Veon Bell with 30-plus carries in 3 of the last 4 weeks. You look at Leonard Fournette, who's definitely capable of carrying a heavy load in Jacksonville, big physical back. Ezekiel Elliott could carry a very physical load. You want to put 25-plus carries on him, he can handle it. And when you get Saquon Barkley and you look at guys like Darius Geis, these aren't little tiny backs anymore. The college is actually producing some big backs that maybe it is a little bit of a throwback, and maybe we do see some teams that aren't as dependent on this running back by committee that we've seen over the last 5 to 7 years. We might have some bell cows back in the league.
Daniel Jeremiah, of course, Move the Sticks. Of course, you can get Daniel Jeremiah at Move the Sticks, NFL Network analyst, and we're kind of reviewing some of the things from the draft. And it's going. I know you're just getting into next year's draft. What positions beside running back look like it might be pretty strong?
I think, again, as we talked about earlier, you got a chance to have a pretty good defensive line group.
Once again, more defense, which I guess not a surprise. I guess that seems to be one of the trends in college now that, you can figure out with the spread offense, what you can do with the quarterback position, but you want to almost take more of your better athletes and put them on defense because, if you have a way to beat the offensive lines, you have a little bit of an edge.
Yeah, you kind of go back to, I guess it's Bill Walsh. If you look at how they kind of directed their draft capital, it was, hey, we're going to win with players on defense, and we're going to win with scheme on offense. And I think when you look at the college game right now, obviously you want to go after the best quarterback you can find, and then to me the next most important thing is the defensive line. If you can get that taken care of, you're going to be really competitive.
Heading into this college season, it looked like it was going to be a great draft coming up for quarterbacks. But I liked how one analyst said it the other day. It's like, it's not based on performance so far this year because some of the best quarterbacks that may come out have not done as well. Sam Darnold may stay in USC for another year. Josh Rosen has been up and down. What looks to be a great class, where would you categorize what might be there for quarterbacks next year?
Well, I think it's got a chance to be pretty good. And I know people are down on Darnold, and Rosen's been a little inconsistent. But Rosen has probably the best pure motion and one of the more polished kids. And you talk about talent. He's dripping with talent. He is an extremely gifted kid. Now, their defense at UCLA stinks. So I don't necessarily put that on him. And then Darnold, to me, when you look at the intangibles and you look at the playmaking ability, I still think he's pretty darn special. People are hung up on the turnovers, and he's got 10 interceptions as we're talking right now. But I can go back through, and I can show you the number of interceptions that Jameis Winston threw. He threw the second most picks in the country when he was coming out. I can show you Deshaun Watson's second most picks when he came out. Those guys have done just okay. So I wouldn't worry too much about the interceptions. And really, when you break them down and you watch him, I know USC has the reputation. Not a lot of NFL players blocking for him right now, and he's got a lot of young players on the outside. So I don't think that he's driving the Cadillac that Matt Leinart and Mark Sanchez got to drive there.
No question. Of course, what wasn't supposed to be a good quarterback class has actually turned out to be reasonably good, particularly because of Deshaun Watson. How amazed are you at how good he's been so far this year?
Well, look, I ended up having him as my top quarterback, but if you'd have told me that he was going to have 15 touchdowns at this point in the season, I said he might be a little ambitious with that. So he's been even better than I anticipated him being. The thing that I come back to with him that you knew is I knew he had the physical ability to make every throw, and I knew that he was, from a work ethic standpoint, a character standpoint, was off the charts. So some of the other gaps that he needed to fill in terms of throwing with anticipation, being a little bit more accurate with the football, those are some things you can work through and work on. But when you start with a baseline of having the physical skills and you add to that the preparation, the work ethic, the toughness, and all the intangibles that he had, I guess I shouldn't be so surprised he's playing this well.
Are you surprised so far from what you've seen from Mitch Trubisky this early?
Well, they're not letting him do a whole lot. They've won 2 games. He's got 12 completions in the last 2 weeks. So they're not putting a lot on his plate, which I think is smart. I don't know what quarterback you could drop into Chicago right now with where they are at receiver that you'd be very successful throwing the ball. So I actually give a lot of credit to the Bears, Dow Loggins and John Fox's company for protecting him, getting him some reps, getting him out there. He's playing, but they're not putting a lot on his plate, and they're finding a way to win ball games with really 0 wide receivers.
And what they don't have in Chicago at receiver is much less in Cleveland. I feel sorry right now for DeShone Kizer because, he's going out there with just virtually nothing to throw to.
And to me, it's just the worst possible situation for him to be in. You watch the way he played 2 years ago at Notre Dame. I thought he had a chance to build off that and be the number 1 pick in the draft. And then you look at the way the Notre Dame team fell apart. You look at a lot of it getting pinned on him, being kind of pulled in and out of the lineup at Notre Dame. You got the whole run-up to the draft where you see, your head coach, whether or not they were comments that were misinterpreted, but it came across as, hey, he should have stayed in school. So you've got some confidence issues there that he needed some time to heal from that and time to develop. And now you throw him right into the fire, and you're constantly jerking him in and out of the lineup. What he went through at Notre Dame. So, I don't know how you recover from that. It's a bad spot for him right now.
And finally, on the Seahawks, in the last couple of drafts, which young guys have you kind of looked at that have done pretty well?
Well, I'm excited to see Richardson start to make some plays down the field, just because you knew he could serve that speed role that they were looking for. So that's been fun to see him there. I'm excited. I know he's starting to play more. I'm excited to see what Postic can do. This is a kid that he could play all 5 spots when he was at LSU. He's smart. He's tough. You watch him a little bit. I haven't broken down the tape yet, but watching the game on TV, I believe the Giants game, he's playing guard, then moved into center. So they need a stabilizing force up front, and I'm hopeful that he can end up being that guy. Jaron Reed was a guy that I'm starting to see kind of come around, who I had as like the 13th or 14th best player in that entire draft. So it warms my heart to see him start to make some plays because he was such a dominant run defender, and I thought he had some upside as a pass rusher.
Okay, you can, Daniel Jeremiah, NFL Network analyst, you can catch him on Twitter at Daniel Jeremiah at Move the Sticks, and you can also catch him on YouTube on the playlist. There's a lot of different things, and of course, Daniel Jeremiah, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, John. Have a great day.
And that does it for this week's podcast. In between episodes, you can follow me on Twitter at Clayton ESPN. If you enjoy these weekly one-on-one conversations, consider leaving a review on iTunes or wherever you're listening to the show. Thanks for listening. See you next time on Schooled with the Professor.